Today we're going to talk about the basics of how to roll out a coil, a set of coils to build with. Before I begin, you'll notice I've got a chunk of clay here. This is a very small chunk of clay. You'll need a lot more than this. And I have a large portion of wet paper towels. When you're building with coils, you end up handling the clay a lot, which dries out the clay. So once you roll out a coil, you want to have this stash of paper towels that you can store it in to keep that moisture. So I'm going to start by grabbing a chunk of clay. And I like to squeeze it into the beginnings of a worm. Very rough beginnings of a worm. Then I start to roll. When I'm rolling my coils, I'm rolling from the tips of my fingers all the way to the heel of my hand and back. If I just stay at the tips of my fingers and rock the clay back and forth, you're going to end up with flat sides and rounded edges, and it's going to be kind of fatter than a nice even coil. So make sure you're rolling all the way from the tips of your fingers to the heel of your hand and back. I like to do a sweeping motion to make sure that I'm rolling all of my coil evenly. And as it starts to get longer, I'll even spread out my fingers. Once you have a coil, let it sit in your damp paper towel and you can start on your next one. Keep in mind, as we're building, you don't want your clay to ever be too much thicker than the width of your pinky. For building purposes, I like to aim for my coils to be roughly between the size of my thumb and my pinky. That way I have material to smooth with, and the coils can bear the weight of each other as I build up higher. If you build your coils too skinny, you'll have a hard time making larger objects. They just don't hold the same weight that a thicker coil will hold. I'm rolling all sides of the coil evenly and then stashing it away. There's a lot of things you can do with a coil before adding it to whatever piece you're building. There's a lot of different techniques that you can use with your coils. You can take two pieces or even fold one in half and make a twist. You can take three pieces and braid them together. By going back and forth, bringing your outer pieces into the middle. And create a braid. You can roll up your coil into a cinnamon roll, spiral type shape. You can roll it in opposite directions from both ends so that it makes more of a scroll. You can even use marbles but keep in mind, we don't want them to be super thick, so you might roll your marble and then cut it in half so that from the side it's nice and thin, but it still looks nice and round from the front. You can zigzag your coils. There are all different patterns you can make with your coils. This is just a small sampling. Happy building. One thing to keep in mind when building with coils, it is very important that you start with a wad of clay and roll the clay out into long coils. You do not want to start with a slab of clay and cut strips. This is a strip. This is not a coil. This is not a coil. It will not count as a coil. Also, it is much, much harder to start from a strip and try to squish it into a round coil than just starting with a worm. Start with a worm, roll it out. We're building with coils. Okay? Coils, yes. Strips, no.